So have you ever noticed that voice that Richard Rohr was talking about that's always chattering in your head? Always chattering, all the time. I know some of you are saying, what voice? I don't have a voice. What's he talking about? Well, that's the voice. Right? Right? That voice that's always chattering. That voice that's always running a constant commentary on everything and everyone and us, on each of us. I mean, we're that, that's where the voice is mostly commenting. For me, it's on me. About what's going on with you, what's happening with you, why are you doing that, what's going on, that kind of stuff. So it's always happening, and for some of us, it goes on 24/7. Well, not 24/7 necessarily, but it starts when you wake up in the morning and doesn't stop until you go to sleep at night. And for some of us, it even keeps us from going to sleep at night, right? That voice that's always chattering. You know, we're studying now, some of the small groups are looking at this book by Michael Singer, The Untethered Soul. And he talks quite a bit about that, and he calls that voice your inner roommate. He says we all have an inner roommate that we can never get away from. And that inner roommate is talking all the time. You sit down to watch television, there's your inner roommate narrating everything you're watching on television, talking about what's going on. We all have that inner roommate. And he talks about how we need to get in touch with that inner roommate. We need to recognize that we have an inner roommate. He even offers that we spend a day pretending that the inner roommate is around us all the time and listening to the inner roommate. Well, here's an example of the inner roommate. So my inner roommate talks all the time. And my inner roommate was talking right when I was sitting down there, and Thea was up here talking. This inner roommate would say, oh, isn't she the nicest person? Isn't she sweet? She is so thoughtful and kind, and she's so gracious. Isn't that great, this inner roommate just talking? Well, guess what? I have more than one inner roommate. So the other voice is saying, yeah, but what is it with this whole Focus Forward team stuff? Haven't we done that before? Or do we really have enough people to do all the things that she's talking about us doing? Oh my gosh, is she crazy? What is going on? And then you might have an inner roommate that says, why do we need to change anything anyway? I think everything is just fine the way it is. Why do we have to change the songs? What are we going to get rid of next? I don't know. So we have these voices in our heads that are always talking. Or maybe it's just me. But he also talks about these voices, they're maniacs. They are maniacs. They're neurotic. And yet we listen to them all the time. We even go to them for advice. Right? And so these voices are always talking. Why is it important for us to recognize the voices? Because it's sort of like Robin was talking about in her song, and in which she shared as she began singing the song. We can get so caught up in those voices that we believe that they are us. We can get so caught up in those voices that we begin to react from those voices. We begin to believe them, and so we feel them. As she said, don't believe everything you think. So it can cause a lot of frustration and tension for us. And so it's important for us to recognize that those voices are going on all the time. doesn't mean that we have to pay attention to them, or it doesn't mean that they are true. So what Singer is talking about in the book is that we recognize that we are not those voices, that we are something deeper than that. We are, as he says, the awareness that is aware. We are that which is aware of those voices. So he encourages us to step back and observe the voices and recognize that we don't have to be controlled by them. We don't have to be in bondage to them. We don't have to lose the fight, as Robin talked about, by being so attached to them. It's important for us to recognize that something deeper than that is who we truly are. Sorry, Ken, I know this is not good for the video, but I'm going to take this jacket off. So we have to recognize who we are beyond that. The soul, sometimes called the soul, the seat of the soul. And we can become the one who observes the voice. Now, I like to think of this idea. I loved that this reading just happened to pop up for me today. Because what Rohr talks about, he talks about it in prayer. But I would say that it's when we're praying, but when we're meditating, when we're willing to go within, that which we are is an awareness that exists beyond our thinking, even beyond our feeling. But it exists someplace deeper in the gut level of us. That place of knowing, that place of awareness. I am awareness becoming aware that I am aware. I am consciousness itself awakening unto itself as a point of awareness that can be aware of everything. And that if I can be aware of it, then it's not me. I can be aware of this podium. Doesn't mean I am the podium. Now, I know some of you are saying, yes, you are the podium. You're everything, right? And we can go there. But for today, I want to say this objective, subjective idea that we can be aware that I am that which is aware. I'm aware of my thinking. I'm aware of my feeling. I'm aware of my body. I'm aware of this podium. I'm awareness itself, and it's that place of centeredness, of peacefulness, where we can step back and not be so caught up in our own thinking. And that it's important for us because I believe that, and this goes back to some of what Walter Starkey talks about in his book, It's All God, that really that point of enlightenment, awakening, we might call it the point of Christ consciousness, is being able to be centered in that place of awareness and still interacting in the world. Knowing that we are in the world, but we are not necessarily of the world. So we can observe our thinking, we can observe our feeling, we can observe each other, we can observe everything around us, we can feel into that and be in the experience of it, but also know that we are not that. I think it's important for us to recognize that we can do both. I can recognize I'm not the chair in the objective sense, but in a subjective sense, I'm one with all. And where do I know that? First of all, I think I know it in my place of centered knowing. So how do we get there? How does that work for us? Well, I think we have to be willing to recognize or to admit, first of all, that we have that voice or those voices in our heads. They're going on in our heads. We have to admit that they're going on, and we have to be willing to stop. Just say, stop, and take a deep breath. Do that with me now. Just take a deep breath. Do you notice how when we're invited to take a deep breath, we recognize how often we do shallow breathing? So when we take a deep breath, and sometimes when we take a deep breath, we do like that. I want to say, take a deep breath and let it go all the way down. Just allow yourself to breathe deeply beyond your solar plexus and even down into your gut. I'm going to say that some people talk about it as this pelvic bowl. This pelvic bowl, the seat, if you will, the seat of our consciousness, the seat of our soul, the seat of our awareness. To breathe into that place. We know our connection, and we can perceive from that place. We can connect from that place. We can observe from that place. And then we can make conscious choices from that place of deep connection, of deep awareness, rather than from that surface level of our thinking and of our interacting. So what I want to say about that too is that from that place, we make conscious choices not only about how we respond to the world around us, but how we respond to ourselves. I may be going a little bit beyond what Singer talks about in the book, but I think it's important for us to recognize these voices that go on in our heads and to even approach them from that centered place. It's not about ignoring them. It's not about trying to get rid of them. It's about meeting them from that place of centered awareness, recognizing that while they are not us, and I want to say we are not the voices in our heads, but the voices in our heads are there because in some way they do serve a purpose. I know this goes beyond what Singer is saying, probably, in the book, but I believe they serve a purpose. We've given our minds a role, and he does say this in the book, that we've given our mind a role, and that role is to keep us safe. That role is to make sense of all of the input that we receive all around us. It categorizes. It tries to comment on everything in order for it to make sense, in order for us to feel comfortable. But we have those voices going on in our heads that's important for us to step back and say to that voice, I'm recognizing this voice is saying, do we have enough people to do all of the things? Do we have the resources? Do we have the energy? Do we have the people who are committed to doing all the work that we are going to be doing or taking on in this focus forward idea? That's a lot. Oh my gosh, I'm scared. I'm worried. And so to be willing to step back and really meet that voice with understanding and empathy, that voice in our head is trying to tell us something. It's trying to tell us, yes, I'm worried. There's a part of me that is concerned. There's a part of me that has a little fear about what we might be taking on. And what am I really longing for? I'm really longing for this beautiful thing to happen. This wonderful expansiveness to occur in our community, for everybody to come together and to co-create this beautiful vision that is going to embrace and invite so many other people to be a part of it. I want that so much, and yet there's a part of me that's afraid that I'm taking on too much. And so we meet those voices with empathy and compassion. Of course you're afraid. Of course. it makes sense that you would be afraid, that you would want that so badly, and yet there's a part of you that's really afraid of that. Same thing with the voice that says, why do we need to change anything anyway? I like it just the way it is. Things are working perfectly just the way they are. Meet that voice with kindness and empathy and compassion. I'm really hearing that you are liking the way things are, and it's scary sometimes to think about change. It's scary to think about how things might be different. And you really enjoy what's happening right now because you feel comfortable here and you like the community the way it is here, and you're afraid that if we change, you'll lose some of that intimacy, you'll lose that spiritual connection, you'll really lose some of that you're really gaining here. So it's important to listen to that voice, not try to push it away. You wouldn't treat a roommate that way, would you? Well, maybe, I don't know. But another human being you don't treat that way, right? We listen, we give empathy and compassion and understanding, and then we make the choices. Of course. And can we go back to that place within us to say, I'm really feeling into the energy that is moving, the energy that longs to be expressed, the energy that wants to draw into itself all of those who are truly in alignment, in attunement with the unity teaching, in attunement with this Christ consciousness idea. There are many of them out there. How can we open ourselves up to that while still being in that place of understanding and compassion for those voices that are scared and worried and fearful? So we have all of those voices in our own heads, but we have all of those voices in our community. And it's important to hear those voices. It's important for us to be clear, not to ignore what's going on around us, not to ignore our own thinking, not to ignore any of the ideas, but to be present with them and understand. Sometimes those things are scary, but to recognize and give compassion without being attached, so much attached to our habitual way of thinking, and to recognize it is fear sometimes that shows up for us. So acknowledging that place, acknowledging that all of that is happening, and still coming to it from the centered place where we know that we are connected. We know that we are one in that divine source, and that we are here to help foster that connection for ourselves, for each other, and for all of humanity. I'm going to say that's a big mission for us, but to really foster that and to welcome people into that. So, going back to that idea of that inner voice that's happening within us, it's there. Can we recognize it's not us? We're not defined by it. We're not in bondage to it, even though sometimes we think we are. We can, in Robin's terminology, not lose the fight. We can certainly overcome all of that, be present with it, and allow ourselves to come from the centered place to create our own experience, our own lives, our lives as a community, and truly our lives as humanity together from that place of deep centeredness. So I want to encourage us that today, to recognize, not ignore, not try to push against, not kick that roommate out, but to be present and to listen with love and care and compassion.